You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 320. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, author of How to Get On Podcasts, the podcast matchmaker, and CEO and founder of the MLG Collective. I'm excited to share the stories and life lessons of changemakers and authors with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. And you know that by now, things that I am passionate about, things that rile me up, things that you will hear me speak on over and over again include podcasting and politics, because I believe that politics are everywhere. Everything we do is political. From the fact that I am showing up here, you get to listen to me, it's political because there are FCC rules. The fact that I can say what I want, First Amendment rights, everything is political. I sit in my home in which we have a mortgage on, political. We pay our taxes, property tax, city taxes. It's all political. My kids are at school, public school, political. Everything is political. And I've shared that before, and that's why we have to talk about politics. Even though people want to keep politics out of the conversation, it's important. Something else that we keep hearing is that the left side has not shown up the way that they have needed to over the years. I am someone who believes that we should not really put down the Democrats. Yes, they need help. Yes, we should be able to criticize, but we should be constructively criticizing, because we do have people who are in office who keep showing up, who are doing the work. You can look at examples like AOC, Jasmine Crockett. These are two powerful women who continue to show up. I love my representative, Jimmy Panetta. He's shown up consistently well before Trump got into office. His emails are out. He has town halls. He is always there and present. And we're seeing more of this from our representatives, our senators, now that they know they need to show up more. They need to show their faces. And so one of the things that we saw the right do throughout the presidential campaign was utilize podcasts and influencers. We didn't see as much come from the left side. And I've done a comparison where I believe it was 23 podcast interviews that Trump showed up for, whereas Kamala Harris showed up for 8. So there was a very big difference in how many interviews each did, which was also reflected in how many people they reached from those episodes. So I've done my homework, and I had an idea that sparked over the weekend that I completely ran with, and it's around political podcasting. Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear. It doesn't mean that I believe we need more political podcasts. Here's how I believe we need to tie podcasts and politics. We need candidates and politicians to show up on podcasts to share of themselves. We don't need more debates. We don't need more talking points. For the most part, we know where all of these politicians and candidates who are running for office, where they stand. If we don't, you can go to their websites. It's all there. What I believe we need to do more of is connect as human beings. And this shouldn't come as a surprise that I feel this way, because obviously it's what I do. I made sure that we start looking at authors as human beings, that we are interviewing authors. We're not interviewing the books. And I want to do the same when it comes to politicians and candidates running for office. Let's allow them to allow us to invest in them as human beings. I have created a free download that is 13 pages long that is for politicians, candidates, as well as podcast hosts, because podcast hosts also need to know how to communicate with politicians, candidates, and staffers, and how to interview them on their shows where normally politicians are not being interviewed. I want to remove the stigma that a politician is anything but a human being. They're regular people like you and I, and this happens to be their jobs. So how do I go about that? Where did this come from? And I'll share with you a personal story. Years ago in 2020, before the pandemic shut everything down, there was a knock on our door. And although my husband's always like, don't answer the door, we don't know who it is, I answered the door. And there was a man, and I had one kid on my hip, and he said, I'm running for city council for your district, and I want to hear your concerns. That was Matt Mahan. He stood out on our front porch with my husband and I for over 30 minutes. And then he followed up with a handwritten card naming everything that we had discussed. We became invested. We knew that if this guy was willing to spend not only one-on-one time with us, but then to follow it up with a message and reiterate that he understood our concerns, then we were going to back him. We threw house parties. We donated. I canvassed with the kids. We did a lot to help ensure that Matt became our council member. And when less than 2 years later, he decided to run for mayor of San Jose, a city that has a population of 1 million people and was just named the 12th largest city in the country, we knew we were going to back him. And we went hardcore to work for him. Canvassing with the kids all around the neighborhood. I dropped off lawn signs to people who wanted them. We talked to anyone who wanted to talk about Matt. We attended different functions and events for him. We donated. I worked with his staff members. We got to meet his family. We became invested in Matt Mahan. And that is why we backed him. We wanted to see him win. And we wanted to see him win 2 years later when they changed the election cycle dates to coincide with the presidential election. We showed up because we've invested in him as a human being. He's done the same for us. Every time he sees us out and about, we get a hug, hello. He knows who our kids are. Our kids know his kids. I know his wife. We've connected as human beings. In addition to that, I do know where he stands on everything. But what we also know is his life story, that he grew up in Watsonville, that his father was a postal worker, that his mother was a teacher, that he went on a bus to the private high school here in town, and he worked all summer long to pay his own tuition. We know his story. We understand the why behind why he ran to be the mayor of San Jose. We need more of this in podcasts because it allows everybody to hear this story, to connect with this human being and to invest in them, to get emotional, empathetic, to understand why they are doing this. Why is it important to them so that it can become important to us as well? I really feel like connecting through podcasts is the way to go. And when it comes to a candidate or a current politician, some are going to think, oh, well, I need to really just focus on shows that are within my backyard. Where are my constituents listening? And to this, I say you are very wrong. I believe that you should focus on all kinds of shows, and we shouldn't just look at the big names. And the big names goes both ways. Whether you're a podcast host looking to interview politicians, don't just look at the big names. When you're a politician, don't just look at the big shows, because listeners everywhere are voters. And when you show up for an interview, you are also creating content that you and your staff can utilize forever. In addition to that, where you are today is not where you're going to be in 5, 10 years, even next year. So maybe you are running for school board right now, but maybe in 5 years, it's city council or it's mayor or it's a Senate position or it's state Senate. There's so many positions that you could be running for, and you will need to reach those constituents, those voters. So make sure that as a politician, as a candidate, you don't just look narrowly at where your current base is. You need to look more broadly, as well as it's going to come back to that thank you after the dinner party. When you start sharing the interviews that you have been on with your constituents, with the people who already follow you, it allows them to become more invested, to share more of you. So it will not matter if it is a city-based type of podcast or it's a national one, because it's content that you can use and you can share, and you can bring people who are in your backyard to this show that you have just recorded an interview with. I find that it's the same exact reasoning when it comes to a podcast host. You should look at local people, but you can also look outside of the local. You can look at state level, you can look at national level, but the connection is between the human beings. We get this conversation that we get to eavesdrop in on. Let's not focus simply on where you stand on certain issues. I want to know, what's your favorite book? What are your hobbies? Why did you decide to leave behind whatever career you had to run for office? It's a sacrifice. I often look at what Jimmy Panetta goes through. He is my congressman, my representative. I will sit in on town halls that he has, phone calls, and I hear what people say to him, even when he's showing up and doing his very best. And there's really nothing you can argue about. People will still berate him. I have seen when people have complained to our mayor. That's part of your job. I get it. But to willingly take on that job, I think we often forget as constituents what a crappy job it can be. And this is why people don't run for office more. I am a firm believer that yes, you should complain, you should criticize, but you also need to make time for the praise. It is just like parenting. Let them know when they have done something that you appreciate. I promise you that if you start doing that, then when it's time for you to criticize or to say you have a problem, you didn't like what they did on some sort of issue or vote, they're going to be more apt to listen to you because they know that you also show your appreciation when they do show up in the way that you would like them to. Keep that in mind. I believe that podcasts have this power. I believe that the left side needs to invest more when it comes to podcasts, not the big shows, not the Call Her Daddy, the Joe Rogan, in other shows, in smaller shows, because we have worked hard to build trust with our audiences. You know that I'm going to show up every single week, that I am going to tell you exactly how I feel, what I believe in, what my values are, and I'm going to share them with you. And whoever I bring onto my show, you know that I have vetted them very closely. I am not going to just bring in someone that I met off the street. I will have Googled them and stalked them and really figured out who they are and what they're about. And I know that this is what other podcast hosts do as well. So that's why it's so important as a politician or a candidate to understand that the trust that a host has built is being extended to you as well. I'm really excited about what the potential is around podcasts and politicians. I've created a new service offering similar to a podcast book tour. I'm calling it a podcast campaign tour. And I want to work with politicians and candidates running for office to help them do this, to share of themselves on podcast interviews and to really get themselves out there so that you can see the human side of every candidate and politician. I want to work with podcast hosts to help them reach out to politicians and to candidates and to ensure that they show up in a professional way, in a way that's comfortable for them on their show, that also has any kinds of disclosures or disclaimers that have to do with politics, while also making sure that they are repurposing and sharing their interviews and making it as easy as possible for a campaign staff to do the same. I want to be that resource. I've created a 13-page download, which you can get. I'm sharing it in the show notes. It's on my website as well. It'll be in social media. That is a playbook on how to do all of this. And then I'm also writing I'm calling it a short book or a guide. It's 11,000 words, but it details everything that I just talked about. It will be available on Amazon after this week because I'm finalizing all of the details, but I want this to be accessible for candidates, for politicians, and for podcast hosts, because I truly feel that if we come together, we can help take over this next election. But also as a reminder, there's elections going on every year. And so we need to work on this every single day, every year, and not only during presidential elections. Send me an email, send me a comment, let me know what you think. Please download this. And if you are interested as a podcast host, I'm going to create a database for candidates and for politicians and offices that you can come to me, and I will have a full database of podcast hosts who are ready, willing, vetted, and know what to do and how to show up when it comes to interviewing politicians and candidates running for office. For those of you who are running for office, thank you. It is a sacrifice. I know it is. I appreciate how you are putting yourself out there, and I want to do all I can to help you get elected.